The story opens up with a young boy named Frey Lydia, and in his final moments, his father entrusted all the heroic spirits to him. They were the mightiest hero spirits that the head of their family had inherited and commanded through the generations, and now that his father's time was up, it was now his turn. However, as he started coughing up blood, his father also warned him that an overwhelming power can also bring conflicts with others, and that's why he advised him to hide his strength and just live in peace. Determined, the son agreed to do that and made a promise to his father. Just like that, 10 years passed, and Frey had all grown up. In the kingdom of Kiril, which was apparently a nation advanced in magic, he was now working as a court magician, and thanks to following his father's instructions, he had been living a very peaceful life. But then, when he went to meet up with the minister who had called him there, the minister just very casually told him that he had been fired, which left him completely shocked. He argued that there must have been some kind of a mistake, since he did achieve some results in the recent monster hunts, but the minister showed him the report that said his only results were that his guts were impressive, and that's it. Frey could not believe that it said he had defeated 0 monsters in the hunt, and shouted that it was impossible, while the minister simply stated that this was a royal order. However, he was generous enough to give him 1 day's time to leave the kingdom, and he just stood there in shock, still trying to comprehend all this. With that, the peaceful life that he was living came crumbling down in an instant. Later at night, crying in his bed, he had no clue what he was supposed to do now after being fired and exiled from the country. But more importantly, he could not understand exactly what went wrong, and wondered if he should have just kept his powers that he received from his father hidden, the power of fully automatic heroic spirit summoning. Apparently, the heroic spirit was automatically summoned according to the situation, and it was able to handle every possible event. This was the true potential of the tremendous power that he had inherited from his father. He opened up the main menu, and in the settings, he had already turned off everything that mentioned the word auto. He had kept this power that could easily make him the strongest in the Churla kingdom with just a touch of his finger, completely hidden all this time. But now that he was leaving the country anyway, he wondered if he should just turn it on a little. As he was trying to think which one to turn on, suddenly, a girl appeared out of nowhere right by his side and whispered in his ear that he should turn on all of them. Calling him her master, she just wanted him to start using her already and asked him why he does not rely on her even a little. She was the heroic spirit, and her name was Maeve. Seeing her pop up out of nowhere really caught him off guard, and he told her not to do that, while she reminded him that he should not be so carefree now, since he was actually being set up by the minister. He agreed that she was right about that, because all of his reports were horribly falsified, and he was sure that he must have gotten caught up in some kind of a power struggle. Since he already understood all that, Maeve questioned him why he did not say anything back to the minister, and he simply replied that he was just tired, seeing how even after he devoted himself completely to this country, they chose to betray him. He was feeling really angry now, and the feeling of resignation was stronger than ever. Maeve felt bad for him, and since it had come down to this, she brought out her crimson flames and suggested that they should go and get his revenge and show them what he was really capable of. Suddenly, the heroic spirits Maruri and Gull popped out as well and were fully on board with the idea of getting revenge and helping Frey. He stopped all of them right there, trying to calm them down, and more importantly, he told them both as well that they should not just come out on their own like this. These 3 were the heroic spirits who served him, and with their combined powers, he also knew in his head that he could basically do whatever he wanted. All he needed to do was just give a single command, and no one would even stand a chance against them. However, he made it very clear to them that he was good, and he did not need any revenge, as it would only make him even more isolated, which he did not want. The ladies gave him a tight hug and tried to convince him that he should get his revenge, as they were always going to be there for him. While they were literally squeezing him, Gold just decided to go ahead and pay the minister a visit, and Frey stopped him again. He thanked all of them for worrying about him and told them that he did not want revenge or anything, but then Maeve stated that if he really wanted that, then he should not make such a pathetic face, and just continued to smile, as she absolutely loves it when he smiles. He was a bit flustered to hear that and also agreed to revise their summoning conditions when suddenly, someone knocked on his door. Wondering who it was so late in the night, he hid all 3 heroic spirits. It was his buddy Kyle, who was literally crying his eyes out, and he asked him if it was really true that he was leaving the country. He could not believe that he had actually been fired, because he knew how amazing his senpai was, and he refused to accept that. He was even ready to start a protest on his behalf, but Frey stopped him, telling him that if he does that, the backlash might even reach him as well. At the end of the day, this was a royal order, so no matter what a single court mage says, it could not be overturned now. Kyle just continued to cry about it, bringing out that he was way more dedicated and sincere than anyone else, and was even kind to everyone in the court without discrimination. However, with a smile on his face, Frey told him that those words from him were more than enough for him. He was sure that because of how young and talented Kyle was, he might even become the court's chief magician someday, and that's why, until that day comes, he requested him to not take any risks for his sake. With that, he bid farewell to Kyle and finally left the kingdom. Later on, he arrived at the kingdom of Arzia, which was nothing but a nation that was left out of exchanges between great powers. The moment he entered the streets, he could already tell that it was completely different from the flashy, restless kingdom of Tyrol because of how simple and calm it was. Just then, a young girl came up to him, and, calling him a gloomy-looking mister, asked him if he would like to buy a flower from her. First up, he asked her if his face was seriously looking that gloomy, and she said that he had the same face as her unemployed dad, which really stung him. Since her dad was unemployed, he guessed that she must be worried about her home situation, and she responded that that was exactly why she was selling flowers, so he decided to buy one from her. But then, as he was about to pay her, he realized that the currency here was different from what he had right now. Seeing how hopeless he was, the little girl just decided to just give him the flower for free and told him to cheer up already. He was amazed to see what a kind girl she was, even though things were clearly not easy for her either. Just then, they heard someone screaming, and a guy on the watchtower informed everyone that a herd of demon beasts was heading for the town. Everyone started panicking, since according to the vigilantes, there were over 50 of those monsters, maybe even more. Terrified, the people wondered if the Kingdom Knights would come to help them, but they really doubted that. This beast stampede was a phenomenon where magical beasts just lose all their reason and go berserk. When this happens on a large scale, it could even wipe out an entire city. That's how dangerous it was. However, for this small city, if there were even 10 of those magical beasts, the whole city would be wiped off the map. Just then, one man noticed Frey in his outfit and recognized that he was a magician. He requested him to protect this city, as his mother could not move from home. Frey tried to tell him that they should just evacuate, but the man stated that it was already too late now and begged him to do something, as he was a magician. At that moment, he remembered his father's final words and how he told him that this power was far too great, which would breed conflict with others, and he would lose his place in this world. If he were to use his power in front of everyone, they would see who he truly was. However, at the same time, he could not just let them all die just so that he could protect his place. There were people right in front of him he could save, only if he reached out his hand. With that thought in mind, since he had already lost his place anyway, he decided to do at least what he believed was right in this situation. He assured everyone to leave it all to him as he prepared himself to hold off the monster beasts. He opened up the servant summoning condition screen, and with nothing to lose anymore, he turned on all of the automatic servant summoning conditions that he had kept disabled all this time. Even for him, it was the first time he was using this power at full strength, and as the system successfully calculated the whole situation, it decided to summon the S-rank heroic spirit, the beast tamer Godro. As she appeared right in the middle of the battlefield, she herself was surprised to see that her master had finally summoned her into the living world and asked him telepathically if he had changed his policy of not using a heroic spirit's power whenever possible. He admitted that he had to do something like that, but putting that aside for now, he asked her what the situation was on her end. She informed him that the number of monsters in front of her was roughly more than 300. He was shocked to hear that from her, because 300 of those monsters could not just obliterate a city, they could even collapse an entire country. He requested her to just hold them off as long as possible so that he could send the other heroic spirits towards her right away. However, she, on the other hand, told him that there was no need for him to be so worried, as she had already tamed all 300 of those magical beasts already, and they were all in love with her now. He was absolutely surprised to hear that, and could not believe that she had already tamed every single one of those monsters so quickly. That's just how strong her obedience effect was, and the beasts could not help but go wild for her as they literally started cheering for her. Putting all that aside, now that the situation was under control, he asked her if she had any idea what caused this rampage in the first place. She briefed him that apparently these beasts had been exposed to a very powerful miasma, and that was probably the cause of this rampage. Miasma was basically an evil aura, which was mainly emitted by demons, but for that to happen, it meant that there were demons present in this area. But then, before he could even make any decision, Godro came back to him and informed him that she had already taken care of the miasma and purified it. Now, as long as her taming was not overwritten, she assured him that those beasts wouldn't go on a rampage again. Since that was the case, he requested her to make the beasts return back to the forest, as he did not want to unnecessarily shed any blood. Hearing that, she commented that he was still as soft-hearted as ever, but that was exactly what was so special about her master, and she obeyed him right away. The scout informed everyone that the monsters were heading back into the forest, and the people took a sigh of relief as they all had been saved. Coming back to Godro, Frey still could not believe that she tamed all those magical beasts in just a second, when normally it would have taken hundreds of normal tamers to stop that many monsters. She proudly stated that she was not like the rest of the tamers. In fact, not just 300, she could even tame 1,000 of them all by herself. He thanked her for saving this city and told her that he was really proud to be her master. Hearing that from him, she turned a little shy and said that he did not need to thank her, as she would always follow orders from her master. Putting all that aside, now came the moment of truth, as he thought to himself if this was really the right choice that he made, since all his life he had been trying to hide his power and live a normal, peaceful life. But then, to his surprise, everyone surrounded him and thanked him for saving their lives. They expressed their gratitude, branding him as the hero of the town, and the little girl from earlier also came up to him, and, with a big smile on her face, thanked him, which made him really happy as well. All this time he used to live in fear that his overwhelming power would only bring forth clashes, hatred, and resentment. However, being able to actually use his power for someone else, he had never thought that it would make him feel this happy. Later in the evening, everyone celebrated their victory, and as a token of gratitude for saving their town, the mayor even gave him a letter of recommendation that he could use to find employment in this new country, and even offered to send a letter of recommendation to the royal capital of Arzia as well. Frey was very grateful for that, and he thanked the mayor for doing all that. He had never thought that he would actually get a letter of recommendation just on his first day, but with this in his hand now, he was sure that he should not have any trouble finding a job. With that said, he wondered if he would be allowed to use his powers in the next job. However, whatever the case might be, he decided to not worry about that right now, and as he celebrated with the townsfolk, he was certain that it would turn into a fun life. The next day, he was directly summoned to the royal palace of Arzia, and the knights at the gate had already heard about the great deeds that he achieved recently. They informed him that the court magician was waiting for him inside, which left him a little surprised. As he walked through the hallways, he wondered if he was going to get scolded for what he did the other day and for acting on his own. But then he looked around and noticed that this place felt very different as compared to the royal palace of the Kural kingdom. It was much more relaxed, and there was a sort of calm atmosphere around there. He finally entered the office, and in there the chief court magician of this kingdom, Roina, excitedly welcomed him and thanked him for coming all this way. She had also heard about his fabulous accomplishments that he achieved the other day, but then, judging from his confused expression, she asked him if he was a little surprised to be greeted by a young woman such as herself. Embarrassed, he clarified that he was in fact amazed to see that someone so young was already the chief magician. He also explained to her that he was fortunate enough to receive a letter of recommendation that brought him there, but he still had not been told what kind of position he was going to be introduced to. To top it all off, he had never really imagined that he would have the chance to speak with the chief of the royal court magicians this soon, hence why he was a little confused about all this. She understood where he was coming from, and to make him feel a bit more relaxed, she asked him to take a walk with her. As the two of them walked together, she explained to him that in this country, there were only a few who possessed magical aptitude. In terms of magic, this nation was actually quite behind other countries, and as a matter of fact, even though it was a bit embarrassing for her to admit, she herself did not possess much magical power either. But amidst all that, when she got to hear that he was able to easily stop the stampede of the magical beasts all by himself, she was truly thrilled. When it comes down to threats from outside, such as the magical beasts, this nation was far too defenseless, since they had no power to match those monsters. Therefore, she finally got to the point and stated that she actually had a request for him. She already understood that his magical abilities were just on another level as compared to the magicians of this nation, and even her as well. Hence, she requested him to take her place and become the head court magician of the kingdom of Arzia. He could not even begin to comprehend what she had just said and told her that there was no way he could do that. However, she kept on insisting, saying that his help was absolutely essential, since there were so few magicians in this kingdom and the issues just seemed to keep piling up. He started thinking about it and contemplated how, when he was in Chiral, he always lived hiding himself away. But in this kingdom, he now had the chance to do something completely opposite, and so he finally agreed to take her up on that offer, which made her extremely happy. However, before moving on, he also clarified to her that it was not just him who held the power to defeat the monsters, it was the heroic spirits within him. She had no idea what he was trying to say and asked him if that was his secret power as a mage or something. Suddenly, all 4 of the heroic spirits popped out and asked him if he had called for them, while she, on the other hand, was left completely stunned. He once again told them not to barge in like this whenever they felt like it, while the 4 of them just wanted to show off their powers to prove how awesome they were. Roina had no clue what the hell was going on there, and she asked him who these people were. Maeve answered for him and introduced themselves as his secret power, the Supreme Sorcerer Maeve, Maruri of 1,000 Death Curses, and the Shatter Night Goal. Free simplified it for her and explained that they were the heroic spirits from the ages, and that they automatically lent him their power according to the situation at hand. He also told her that it was Godro who had stopped the stampede the other day, and Roina quickly thanked her for saving their city. With that said, she was absolutely amazed to see that he was able to command 4 such magnificent heroic spirits. However, that was not quite right. There were a bunch of heroic spirits inside the system, and all the spirits together formed one whole, which yet again left her completely shocked. He asked her if she wanted to see the other spirits as well, but she was still trying to comprehend all of this and told him that it was already more than enough, as she had gotten the idea of how amazing he was. But it only solidified what she had thought about him, and she said to him that his powers were exactly what this country needed. Thinking about all those people he saved and the smiles they had on their faces, he was ready to use his powers for the sake of those people and give it everything he had got. And so he agreed to help her and use the power of the heroic spirits to make this country peaceful and prosperous. A few days later, it was finally time for Frey to report to his work in an unfamiliar land, and that made him a little nervous. Maid came outside and complimented him, saying that white looked really good on him and that he was looking quite well. But he, on the other hand, could not shake the strange feeling he had because just until last week he was wearing the uniform of the Kural Kingdom's court magician, yet now things had changed so much. Maeve told him to just stop thinking about the country that banished him and not be so hung up on it. However, even though the people in this country had been very kind to him so far, he could not stop thinking about what would happen if he got betrayed once again, and that was part of the reason why he was feeling so nervous about meeting his new coworkers. But then Maeve assured him that if that does happen, she would be there to comfort him, and he appreciated that. With that said, he headed to the office, and upon entering the room, he formally introduced himself and looked forward to serving as a royal court magician. But little did he know, Roina and his 2 new coworkers had thrown a small celebration for him, and they excitedly welcomed him to the royal court chamber of the Kingdom of Arzia. He was quite surprised to see that, while Roina went ahead to reintroduce herself as the former head mage, and now that he was there, all 4 of the court magicians had finally assembled. Confused, he asked her if that was all of them, as it seemed very few, and she shared with him that in this country, there were already very few people who were gifted with magic. That's why they were all so short-handed. Frey began to understand that there must not be many wizards present in small countries like these, and seeing how they were welcoming him so generously, it made him a bit embarrassed. With that out of the way, one of his coworkers introduced herself as Kiki, and stated that even though she was not very good at magic itself, when it came to making magical tools, she was actually pretty confident about those. She began showcasing one of her creations, which was a fully automatic chick gender sorter, and she was very proud of it, saying that she must get a patent for it fast because what a groundbreaking invention it was. The other coworker went ahead to introduce himself as Voltec, and just as he was about to explain what his specialty magic was, he was constantly getting disturbed by Kiki and her chicks, and told her to turn it down. Getting back to the topic, he proudly shared that his specialty magic was that he did not have one. Kiki brought up that his attack magic does have quite an incredible power, but he explained that power does not matter if his spells do not hit the target. He then mentioned how Roina had been repeatedly saying how awesome Frey was for stopping a stampede all by himself, and he was glad to finally meet him, while she got really embarrassed and told him to stop it already. Frey once again clarified that he did not stop that entire stampede alone, but putting that aside, he promised to do his best to live up to their expectations. With all those formalities out of the way, he asked them if they could tell him more about the mission in the Kingdom of Arzia right now. Voltec started off by explaining that the main issue right now was human resource training, since even the magic schools were not able to fill their student quota. But Kiki, on the other hand, mentioned that their infrastructure was lacking as well, and compared to other countries, theirs was pretty underdeveloped. Voltech stayed on his issue and brought up that they did not have enough teachers who could even teach magic because they were a small, weak nation after all, while Kiki kept arguing that they did not have enough magic tools capable of large-scale construction and did not have enough craftsmen either. However, Roina interrupted both of them and pointed out the most important and serious problem of all, and that was the threat of the magical beasts. They did not have enough measures to take against the monsters and save the people. Furthermore, they did not possess enough personnel to respond either, and because of that, the frontier villages continued to suffer non-stop damage. It was only because of Frey that they were able to save that village from the stampede. Frey got the gist of what was happening in this country, and judging from the change in everyone's mood as soon as she brought up this topic, he could tell it was a very serious issue. Since that was the case, he pointed out that the barrier for magical beasts might have gotten weak. He asked them how strong this country's barrier was, as he believed he could make some improvements to it. However, Roina revealed that the kingdom of Arzia did not have any barriers to begin with. Shocked, he asked them how they were defending against the magical beasts all this time, and she answered that they just don't start a fight, and when the time comes that a beast does appear, they simply evacuate. The beasts who come from another dimension only go on a rampage for a certain period of time, and after that, most of them eventually return back to their original dimension anyway. Since the kingdom did not have the power to defeat those monsters, they simply waited for the time to pass until they went back to where they came from. Frey could not believe that they had been living like this, so recklessly, but then, just as he was about to say something, he noticed the look on Roina's face, and she was clearly frustrated with this as well, but they had no other choice. He understood how she must be feeling about all this and could tell that she did not truly agree with this method either. She also guessed that he must be very disappointed, as she had heard that in the Kural kingdom where he came from, they had a massive barrier that surrounded the entire capital's outskirts. In that kingdom, everyone lived peacefully without any fear of monster attacks, and she as well had always wished Arzia had a barrier like that as well, but reality was different. However, all of a sudden, Kiki and Voltech interrupted her and just pulled her cheeks. Confused, she questioned them about what the hell they were doing, and Kiki stated that because she was about to cry, they wanted to make her smile. Voltech also added that it was their job to make the people smile, but to do that, they themselves needed to be able to keep smiling as well. Those words struck her deep, but still she pointed out that they did not need to pull her cheeks so hard, and while the three of them continued to argue, Frey looked at them and remembered how the Kural conferences always used to be so tense. Everyone always probed each other's motives, and no one there gave a damn about the country. In contrast to that, the Arisa conference in front of him was full of laughter from everyone, and it was such a carefree conference. But even then, he could feel that they all cared deeply about their country and comrades, and that put a smile on his face, thinking what a pleasant place it was. Coming back to the topic, he told Roina that he actually had a plan regarding that barrier, but just then, a knight came running inside the office and reported that magical beasts had appeared in a northern village of Arisa. 2 magical beasts had appeared at the same time, and according to the reports, the evacuation status was also running bad. Roina was ready to head out to rescue those villagers, but Voltech reminded her that it was a full day's distance, which meant they wouldn't be able to reach on time, and they needed to think of another way. Roina did not want to just sit idly and do nothing about this situation. However, Frey stepped up, and he was ready to go instead. He had the perfect heroic spirit in mind that he could use, and so he summoned Jill. He requested her to help him out with his travel, and she promised to make sure he had a wonderful trip with her. The rest of them had no clue who she was and how exactly she was going to help, but then suddenly she walked up to the balcony, saying that indoors was way too cramped for her, and she just jumped outside. All of a sudden, she transformed into a huge dragon, and she was ready to take them wherever they wanted, while the rest of them were left completely stunned. This was their first time seeing a real dragon, and as Frey hopped on, Roina requested him to take her with him as well, since she knew this country's geography better than anyone else. He did not argue and allowed her to come with him. As the two of them soared through the skies, she was simply amazed and could not believe that she was actually flying in the sky while riding a dragon. Roina held on to him tightly, and he kind of liked that feeling, but then Jill called him out and first apologized for interrupting him while he was focusing all his attention on his back. However, she informed him that they would be able to see the village soon now. Roina was just shocked to see that they had already arrived, and she tried to take a closer look to find out where the magical beasts were. She finally spotted a great boar which was going on a rampage without stopping. It was known to possess incredible charging power, and it was also a monster that was able to unleash scorching flames, and that's exactly what it was doing. As soon as Frey heard scorching flames, he brought out Maeve, as he was confident that compared to her flames, it would be like aiming for a candle flame. He asked her if she could hit the great boar from there, and that was not a problem for her at all. However, with her level of magic power, there was the risk that the whole village might get caught up in it. Roina took a closer look, and it seemed like the village evacuation was not finished yet, so they could not use Maeve, otherwise the villagers would be harmed as well. Since that was the case, Frey understood that they would have to use an unbelievably precise spell in order to be able to attack from this distance. So he used the fully automatic heroic spirit summoning and decided to summon the most suitable heroic spirit for this case. A spirit appeared, and just then the boar was about to attack a little kid. However, before it could strike, a spear hit the boar straight in the heart, and it was taken out in an instant. Of course, it was Harvel, the jet black sorcerer, who had just done that, and he proudly informed them that the beast had been taken care of. Even Frey was shocked to see that he had successfully pierced the great boar's heart from such a distance, while he simply stated that it would help them minimize the damage. Roina could not believe that, as she pointed out that normally, the more powerful a spell was, the harder it was to aim. Hence, to fire a top-tier spell that could take down a magic beast in a single blow from that distance was simply impossible. However, Frey told her that Harvel's control over magic was just that exceptional, and the heroic spirit also added that even from this distance, he could easily thread the spell through the eye of a needle as well. With that said, Harvel was also surprised to see that Frey had recently changed his approach and was using heroic spirit summoning more often now, and asked him how that happened, to which he replied that it just kind of happened that way. Since that was the case now, he requested him to call him out more frequently and promised that he would channel magic through even the tiniest of holes. He could even target these boars from a kilometer away, while Frey, on the other hand, just hoped that nothing like this happens again. But then suddenly, Maeve interrupted him and told him not to steal her spotlight from her master. He rubbed it in and mentioned that he was the most optimal choice for this situation, and she argued that she was always the optimal one in every situation. However, he kept on going and just repeated the same line as he questioned her if she was able to thread magic through the eye of a needle like him. She responded that in the end, a technique was nothing more than just a technique, and when faced with overwhelming power like hers, he would simply be blown away, and just like that, the two of them continued to argue, while Frey just stood there with a worried expression and wondered how it had come down to this. He tried to calm down both of them, requesting them not to fight with each other, and told them that both of them were absolutely flawless in their own ways, as they were both the greatest magicians he had ever seen. In fact, he was counting on both of them from here on out, and hearing all that, they finally agreed to stop fighting. Harvel decided to take his leave from them since his task was done, and before leaving, he proudly stated that he had no regrets in his life as a heroic spirit, while Frey told him to stop acting like he was dying or something and just go home already. After he left, Roina wanted to take a closer look at the village's condition, and so they decided to land on the ground. They spotted an injured man, and she quickly ran to him in order to help him out and apply some first aid, but Frey asked her to leave it to him as he proceeded to use the spirit summoning orb to summon a spirit perfect for this situation. And so appeared the Crimson Saint, Scarlet, and he requested her to take care of this man's injury. She used her Holy God's Blessing technique in order to heal his wounds, and in an instant, all his wounds were completely healed, which left Roina very surprised. The man thanked her for treating his wounds, but then all of a sudden, someone tried to attack them from behind, and Scarlet immediately deployed her magical shield to block that attack. They wondered if another magical beast had appeared, and it turned out it did, and this time, it was a giant arm. Roina recalled hearing that it was a terrifying monster that spreads death all across the entire area once it appears, and its instant death magic was something that could not be defended against, even for a heroic spirit. However, Scarlet, on the other hand, simply laughed and told her that that was exactly what she had just blocked, the unavoidable death spell. As a matter of fact, it was not going to have any effect on her, and as she started grinning like a maniac, she decided to go ahead and purify that beast. She unleashed a thunder strike upon that monster, landing a direct hit on it, and she continued to do that again and again to completely purify it, all the while acting like a complete psychopath, which left everyone else completely stunned, as they could not believe it was the same gentle-hearted holy maiden. Finally, she was done with her purification and felt quite satisfied, while Frey commented that it looked more like she was trying to erase it from existence instead of purifying it. But then Maeve called them out and told them not to let their guard down, since the fight was not over yet. Suddenly, the giant arm grew wings, and it began to fly into the sky in order to run away. But little did it know that that was exactly what Maeve wanted, because now it was fleeing into an empty sky. She could finally use the full strength of her magic, and as she brought out her staff, she unleashed a spell that instantly went kaboom and obliterated the monster entirely. Yet again, Roina was simply speechless witnessing that much power, and she also agreed that with that kind of power, there was no way she could use it inside the village. Feeling proud, Maeve asked Frey to shower her with praise for how incredible and strong she was, but then once again, Harville popped out and told her that that kind of attack would not fit through the eye of a needle, pissing her off. But with all that out of the way, the beast extermination was finally complete, and they decided to go ahead and check the village for damage. Later on, arriving back at the castle, he finally shared with everyone that he actually possessed 1,000 heroic spirits, which left everyone quite shocked, while Voltech complimented Maeve for her incredible spell, as even they could see the explosions from all the way over there, which was quite insane. But then Frey brought up that even so, the village had still suffered damage this time. Although it was a good thing that there were no casualties and no one had died, if they wanted to prevent the magical beasts from invading this country again and again, he announced that he was thinking of putting up a barrier over all of Arisa, which shocked all three of them present there. Furthermore, he just casually mentioned that the one who set up the barrier around the kingdom of Kurl was actually his ancestor, and since he was a master of the same heroic spirits as well, he had a feeling that he might be able to pull it off too. Voltech was just too tired to even be surprised anymore, and he asked him when they were starting, to which he replied that he was starting right now, and that yet again left him surprised. Without wasting any time, he activated his fully automatic heroic spirit summoning, and to create the anti-beast barrier that could cover all of Arisa, he summoned a total of 10 heroic spirits all at once. He explained to them what they were going to do, and all of them took their positions, ready to form the barrier. At last, he instructed them to deploy the anti-demon beast barrier, and in an instant, the barrier was formed completely, leaving Roina and the others simply speechless. He informed them that it was still just a temporary barrier, so it was pretty fragile as compared to Kurl's, but even so, he was quite confident that they would be able to block a considerable number of beasts. Until the barrier reinforcement was complete, he promised to deal with any beasts that did manage to break through somehow. But then, when he looked at Roina, her eyes were filled with tears, and she was just lost in her thoughts. She quickly apologized to him for not listening, but she still could not believe that they had actually managed to put up a barrier, and it all felt kind of like a dream to her. Seeing her like that, he once again realized that she truly did care about this country from the bottom of her heart, and it only showed what a kind person she was. He then brought up that the meeting was also going to start soon, but then all of a sudden he started getting dizzy, and he understood that it must be because it was the first time he had operated this many heroic spirits at once. He tried to push through, saying that this much was nothing for him, but then Roina gave him a hand and asked him not to overdo it. Since she could not defeat magical beasts like him or put up barriers, she felt that this was the least she could do and just try her best to support him. Hence, she requested him to rely on them a little more as well, because in the end, they were all comrades. They went back inside, and Voltech and Kiki quickly checked up on him as well, asking him if he was okay and telling him not to push himself so hard, since running out of mana was very dangerous. He thanked them for showing such concern and assured them that he would be completely fine with just a bit of rest, and they were really glad to hear that. Seeing all of them around him, treating him like their true comrade, he felt really happy. Maeve was happy for him as well, seeing how they were all welcoming him, and on top of that, even the heroic spirits looked much happier than before in this place. Seeing how everyone was having so much fun, he was really glad that he chose to come to this place. With that said, Roina then came up to him and stated that since he actually stood above them, she wanted him to call her just by her name and drop the formalities. He wasn't too sure about that, as he felt it would be very inappropriate for a newcomer like him to call his senior without honorifics, but she kept on insisting, and finally he agreed to call her just by her name and told her that he looked forward to working with her. The moment he called out her name that way, she could not help but get really shy, and she looked forward to working with him as well. The next day, when he woke up in the morning, Maeve was sitting right on top of him, and she wished him a good morning. He simply told her that she should not be running off on her own like this while he was asleep, and she annoyingly said that it would ruin the fun of her wake-up surprise. Turns out he had already been through this many times before, and that's why he had gotten pretty much used to it now. She also mentioned how back in the day, he used to completely freeze up just from being near her, which was really cute, and he told her that he was just a kid back then, so she could not really blame him for acting like that. However, she also stated that from her perspective, he was still basically a kid. Putting all that aside, she asked him what he was going to do today, as he had gotten the day off, which was quite new to them, since back in Kiril, they never really had any days off, but he himself had no idea what he was supposed to do either, as he was not really used to it. Maeve advised him that instead of overthinking about it, he should just do what he wanted to do. There was one thing that he had really wanted to do ever since he arrived in this country, and that was to look around the city of Arisa. Later on, he informed everyone that he was going to take a tour around the town, and Roina was a bit surprised to hear that, as she had thought that he would like to rest on his day off. But he told them that he was going outside to buy some supplies anyway, so he thought he would check on the town as well. So he asked them if someone would like to come along with him, to help him out a little, and immediately, Roina stepped up to accompany him. Voltek wanted to come along with them as well, but then Kiki stopped him and reminded him that he had an important job to do. She took him to the side and quietly whispered to him that they should try their best to give Roina the push she needed, because she was finally getting bold with him, and he just nodded. Kiki went up to both of them and sent them out to enjoy strolling around town. Later on, as the two of them walked through the streets, Roina introduced him to the North District, from where he could buy all the daily necessities that he could possibly need. He was surprised to see how lively it was around there, and she explained to him that the Arisa Foundation Festival was coming up soon, which was why there was so much energy among the people. As a matter of fact, there were more food stalls than usual this year, and she showed him the local specialty of the town, which was Ashia Piyoko bread. Apparently, when they bite it, it makes a funny K sound, and he just stood there, wondering how that even worked. All of a sudden, Maeve called him out from a small window and questioned him about why the hell he was just standing there. The spirits told him that in times like this, he was supposed to say that he would go buy it for her, and he was getting really confused, while Roina could clearly hear what they were all discussing among themselves. He then turned to her and repeated the same thing the spirits had told him, line by line, and said that in times like this, he would buy that for her. Yet again, Maeve had to pop out to explain to him that he did not need to add that, in times like this part, and Roina just started laughing as she thanked him for doing that. As the two of them started eating, he was quite surprised to see how light the flavor was, and it was exactly how he liked it. In contrast, Carol's sweets usually used a ton of sugar, and as soon as she heard that, Roina actually wanted to try it out. After that, they both continued to walk through the streets, and while doing so, she thought to herself that even though she had only come along to help him out, this was starting to feel like a real date now. Suddenly, he called her out and brought up that since this area was the commercial district, it would have been much more convenient if the streets there were paved. Confused, she asked him what he was trying to imply, and he answered that although he had come out today with a light heart, since she was kind enough to come along with him as well, he suggested that they should thoroughly inspect the entire city. She immediately said yes, since it meant she would be able to spend more time with him. Coming back to what he said about the road paving, she agreed that he was indeed right about that. However, in present-day Arisa, they could not really execute any large-scale construction. He shared with her that back where he came from, they used magic tools for large-scale construction, and she was surprised to hear that such incredible magic tools existed in the first place. He further added that they actually relied mostly on magic, even for things like treating patients in a hospital, for which they used healing magic. But Roina once again mentioned that the main issue here was that this was a very small nation, because of which they lacked both magitech engineers who could make such magic tools, as well as people who could use healing magic. Since that was the case, Frey suggested that he could just send a heroic spirit to the construction site to take care of all this. However, he also understood that if they wanted to develop this nation in the long run, it was very important to train those people who were gifted in magic, and the best way to do that was through the Magic Academy. As for the educators, one heroic spirit came to his mind that could be perfect for this role, and that was Harvel. With that said, they both decided to go pay a visit to the academy next time. Just then, a lady called out to Roina and requested her to come to her stall. She wanted her to try out the new dish that she was thinking of serving at the upcoming festival, but then another man called out to her as well and requested her to try out his item too. Witnessing all that, Frey commented that the townspeople must really like her, and acting modest, she replied that she could only hope for that to be true. But then he also mentioned that in the village they had visited to handle the magical beasts before, the villagers had looked very relieved just seeing her there. And so, he was actually glad that she agreed to come along with him today, Again, she modestly responded and told him that she did not really do anything in that village, because it was him who had saved the villagers. However, if he felt that she was able to help him out in any sort of way, then she was very happy to hear that. With that said, they decided to keep moving forward and explore the rest of the town. As they walked around, suddenly, a couple of kids came up to her and hugged her. Frey asked her who these kids were, and she told him that these were the children from the orphanage. The kids looked at him and asked him if he was her boyfriend, which made Roina really embarrassed, and with a nervous voice, she told them they were completely wrong. She introduced Frey to them, and of course they had heard about him a lot as well, since he had now saved them twice, which had made him quite famous around there. They wanted to see some heroic spirits, and he was just surprised to hear that they even knew about that. Still, he agreed to show it to them, but then before he could even summon any of them, 4 of the heroic spirits jumped out on their own to meet the children. He reminded them that they should not be popping out like this randomly, and Maeve said that since the children were calling for them personally, they did not want to ignore their expectations and were simply fulfilling their roles as heroic spirits. The kids were simply amazed to see all those spirits, and because of how happy they looked, Frey allowed them to play all they wanted with the kids. The children enjoyed themselves a lot. Some hopped onto Jill to experience how it felt to ride a dragon, while one boy started pulling Maeve's hair, insisting that she play with them more. She did not want to, as she felt that for a heroic spirit like her to be looking after a kid was a bit weird, and Frey pointed out that she herself was the one who came out so eagerly. She shared with him that the reason why she did that was because this scenery was something she or the rest of the spirits could never have seen in their time. The heroic spirits were once the heroes of their times, and that's why all of them were those who perished at a young age on the battlefield. To witness with their own eyes the world that they had protected, she felt that it was the greatest honor of a heroic spirit. In her eyes, the world was quite peaceful now, since 600 years ago, when she was born, the war between humans and demons had been going on for a very long time. Some kids overheard her, and curious, they asked her what demons were. She explained to them that demons were a higher existence than even magical beasts, and they were far worse than those beasts. Hearing that, the kids got a little scared and asked her if she was stronger than the demons, to which she proudly answered that of course she was stronger, and in fact 600 years ago, humans had won and the war ended. With that said, the story time was over, and she sent the children ahead to play with the rest of the heroes, while she stayed with Frey. He then brought up that on the day the stampede was stopped, it looked like the magical beasts were exposed to the miasma of a demon, and he asked her if she knew anything about that. She agreed that she had felt the same miasma as well, and she believed that it was highly likely that a magical beast who had been exposed to miasma in another dimension accidentally came out in this town. However, it was also possible that a demon intentionally triggered that stampede, and if that was the case, she guessed that they might be thinking of resuming their invasion of the surface. Frey felt that calling it an invasion was a bit of an exaggeration, since she herself had just said that demons had not been seen for hundreds of years now. But she told him that she had only said that earlier for the sake of the children, so as not to scare them. However, the truth was that the demons had just retreated to another dimension in the war, which meant that there were still probably many demons who had survived and were simply hiding, waiting for their time. Although there were not many demons that existed, their individual powers were incomparable to humans, and if even one of them were to invade today, she was certain that the whole country would be destroyed. Frey and Roina were both absolutely shocked, and he stated that as long as she was with him, things should be fine. However, she revealed to him that there was one thing she had not told him all this time. The fact was that before she became a heroic spirit, the end of her life was because she was murdered by one of the demons. As soon as they heard that, both of them were left completely stunned. But then suddenly, she started laughing and told him that she was just joking. Of course, there was no way she would just let herself be killed like that, so she slaughtered that demon as well and did not exactly lose. Although demons were very dangerous opponents, she truly believed now that in this day and age, with a master who was commanding the spirits of the river, they would surely be able to do something whenever a crisis like that occurred. Thinking about it for a moment, he admitted that the responsibility he had was far too great, but at the same time, he was determined to protect the peace the heroes had created and promised to do everything he could. Back to her usual self, Maeve started teasing him, saying that he had become quite the smooth talker. But then suddenly, the kids started pulling her hair once again, insisting that she play with them. Annoyed, she ran after them, and Frey decided to save this conversation for when they were back at the palace. Later in the evening, as he and Roina finally returned back to the palace, she asked him if he liked his tour around the town of Arzia. to which he replied that even though it was not a rich country, the people of the town were all very helpful toward each other, and it truly felt like a very warm-hearted country. Although he had just gotten here a few days ago, he could say with confidence that he liked this nation a lot. She was really glad to hear that from him, and he further stated that at first, he had some doubts about using his power of the heroic spirits, but now he had decided to use his powers without any reservations so that he could make this country better. Still, he also knew that there were many things that he could not do alone, so he asked her if she could lend him her strength as well, and she nodded with a smile. But then all of a sudden, the automatic heroic spirit summoning got activated on its own, and 4 of the spirits emerged, standing by in battle formation and ready for an enemy attack. Confused, he had no idea what the hell was going on, and seeing that 4 of the top-ranked heroic spirits were summoned all at once, it only meant one thing: the enemy was a huge threat. Before he could even ask anything of them, Roina pointed to the sky and told him to look above. There was a big crack in the sky. The spirit speculated that it was probably a tier in a different dimension, and if that really was the case, Frey wondered if the barrier was not working properly. However, Harville explained to him that under normal circumstances, it was just a naturally occurring phenomenon where magical beasts appear, and it just bursts and disappears on its own. But this time, there was someone who had created this crack intentionally. Then suddenly, Frey heard a voice, questioning him about whether he belonged to the Lydia bloodline. He looked up, and there was a man with horns and wings, levitating in the sky. Harville warned Frey to be on his guard, as the man in front of them was the master of the alternate dimension, a demon. Terrified, Roina could not believe that a demon had actually appeared in Arzia. While Frey questioned the demon how he knew his name, the demon absolutely hated that the humans called him a demon, and he revealed that his name was Narga. As for why he was there, he was going to put to the test the power of Lydia's bloodline in modern times. He charged straight at him and was about to attack him when Gol stepped up and blocked the demon's attack and saved his master. Narga took a step back, while Frey stood there, wondering what exactly he meant by testing his strength and for what purpose. Gol was ready to hunt down that demon, and Frey contemplated that since the enemy's weapon was for close combat, a mage like Maeve and Harville would be a very bad match against it, so it was true that a warrior like Gol would be a good fit here. However, he first needed information on the demon, and therefore he told him to be careful. But Gol just charged straight ahead and landed a heavy blow directly on Narga, which shook up the entire area. He himself was surprised to see that he misjudged his strength and ended up releasing a lot of force. Frey repeated the same thing as well, telling him that he was using way too much force and would actually destroy the whole castle. But then, Gol stated that he was actually holding back way too much right now, which just shocked Frey even more as he realized what incredible strength he possessed. However, when the dust settled, it turned out Narga was completely unscathed even after taking the attack head-on, and he struck back, swinging his sword with such force that he landed a direct hit on Gol and tossed away his helmet. Gol received some damage, but instead of getting hurt, he grew even more excited as he started bleeding, since he could not even remember now how many centuries it had been since he last bullet. This was exactly how he wanted a fight to be, and he once again charged straight at him to attack him. As the two of them continued to exchange blows, Frey was still in shock, as he could not believe that Gol, who always boasted about his strongest single combat, got hit by the enemy, and he realized just how powerful these demons were. But still, he had 100 heroes on his side, and he asked Maeve and Harville to help them out as well. But then, all of a sudden, they heard a voice commanding them to stop. They looked up towards the crack in the dimension and wondered if there was a new enemy. The air was growing heavy, and they could feel a very absurd magic, while Maeve knew that feeling all too well, and she literally started trembling. Frey asked her if she knew what it was, and she revealed to him that in the war with the demons that happened all those centuries ago, she fought as one of the hero's companions. In the final battle, as her comrades fell one after another, she had used all of her life force to cast one last ultimate spell. All this time, she was certain that she had killed the mastermind of that war, the king who led all the demons. However, even after all this time, she could recognize his cursed magic anywhere. The one behind that voice was the demon Lord Galvera, and he was the same demon who had killed her. The voice confirmed that he was indeed the demon Lord Galvera, and everyone present could feel the pressure of his magic just from hearing his voice. Even Narga dropped everything he was doing and kneeled down, stating that he should not exchange words with such puny humans, but the demon lord commanded him to be silent, and then suddenly, a jolt of magic came straight towards him and completely obliterated him in an instant. Frey was in complete shock, wondering if that was Galvera's magic that had just annihilated Narga in a single blow. But then Harvel told him that it was probably a high-level retrieval spell, which meant that Narga had simply been driven away. Galvera clarified that he bore no ill will against them, and in fact, he even apologized to them for the rude and rash actions of his subordinate. But the thing was, he actually had a use for Frey. For some certain reasons, he could not come to meet him, and that's why he invited him to come to his castle instead, which was beyond this dimension. He promised to entertain him to the best of his ability, and he looked forward to meeting him. Maeve shouted that there was no way they would fall for such transparent lies and actually step into his territory. She turned to Frey as well and told him that there was no need for them to take this bait, as it was clearly a trap no matter how they looked at it, and he also agreed that the possibility of it being a trap was indeed very high. However, he also asked her if, were they to fight the Demon Lord together, they would be able to stand a chance, to which she answered that it would be a very tough fight because their opponent was the strongest and most evil Demon Lord. Galvera was the Demon Lord who once dominated half the world, and he was a man with powers that could be called the pinnacle of living beings. With an inexhaustible supply of power, he constantly maintained the hardest defensive barrier at all times, and with layers of multiple spells, he instantly targeted his opponents with magic that would kill them in just one hit. He was a man who was far stronger than Gol, possessed even higher magic than Maeve, and attacked with magic more precise than Harvel's. Even though there was now a master who commanded the heroic spirits, even if they could defeat Galvera together, she warned him to be prepared to lose a considerable number of heroic spirits. As soon as he heard that, he recalled that even though the heroic spirits were already dead, if they were to exhaust too much power, they would simply disappear and could never be summoned again, so it was now his decision whether he was ready to sacrifice his heroic spirits. With that in mind, he told Maeve that he completely understood how dangerous the Demon Lord Galvera was and that he could not be trusted at all. However, that was exactly why he believed that they should go to him. He pointed out that if they were to fight such a powerful demon king in this country, the whole nation would, without a doubt, be destroyed. Just in case something happened out here, he instructed Gol and Scarlet to stay behind. And as for Roina, he requested her to protect Arzia while he was gone. She was a bit hesitant to let him go, and just as she was about to say something to him, he promised her that he would surely come back. Hearing that, she agreed to listen to him, and wished him all the best for his journey. He hopped onto Jill and flew straight towards the dimensional rift. Entering inside the rift, he arrived on the other side, in the demon realm, and it was a complete wasteland, filled with cursed magic. It was his first time experiencing a different dimension, and he had never thought he would actually be able to witness it. Maeve warned him not to let his guard down, as there could be multiple traps until they reached the castle. Judging from her tone, he could tell that she was more bloodthirsty than ever, which was quite new to him. She had her own reasons for being this angry, as she recalled her last moments and how her sister sacrificed herself for her just so that she could live. With those memories in her head, she was determined to make sure the Demon Lord paid for that. They finally arrived outside the Demon King's castle, and he asked Jill to land near the gate. Upon landing, they noticed that there were no signs of any demons around. Judging from the presence, Harvel was certain that behind the huge door in front of them, there was only one person. Frey remembered that the Demon Lord did mention he would welcome them with maximum hospitality and wondered if this was what he meant by that. Nonetheless, with utmost caution, they entered inside the castle, and as soon as they stepped in, Galvera thanked him for accepting his invitation. They looked in front of them, and it turned out there was a woman sitting on the throne. Confused, he asked Maeve if this was actually Galvera, but she, on the other hand, was absolutely pissed, and she questioned the demon who the hell she was. Even though her presence was exactly like Galvera's, the Demon Lord she knew looked nothing like that at all. The demon simply laughed and was amused to see that Maeve had not changed at all. She remembered that she was also the first one among the heroes to challenge her. She really wanted to rekindle their old friendship. However, right now, she did not have the time to do that. She shifted her attention back to Frey, and cutting straight to the point, she asked him if he would like to form an alliance with her, which left him completely shocked. She explained to him that because he possessed immense power, she actually wanted him to use that and protect her. They refused to believe that the Demon Lord herself needed protection, and to begin with, they questioned her on whether she even was Galvera. She simply answered that even though their minds could not really comprehend it right now, they should be able to tell that she was the real deal by feeling her magic on their skin. However, if they still refused to believe her, she decided to prove it to them and demonstrated her overwhelming magic spells. If that was still not enough, laughing like a maniac, she asked Maeve if they should go ahead and kill each other once again, just like that day, and all of them immediately got on their guard. But then she calmed down again, clarifying that she was only joking and hoped that they now understood that she was indeed the real demon lord. As the three of them remained silent, she was happy to see that they were now on the same page. And with that out of the way, she suddenly brought out 2 glasses of beer and wanted to make a toast with Frey. He just stood there staring at her, and she reminded him that she had promised she would give him the best hospitality she could, and that was why, especially for him, she had prepared the best liquor that was available on Earth. He refused to drink with her, and since that was the case, she just went ahead and made a toast by herself. However, jokes aside, she finally explained to them that in today's time, the Demonkin had actually grown in strength and had become a force equal to her own. As a result, a new 7 demon kings had arisen. As soon as he heard that, Frey was absolutely stunned, because if what she said was true, it meant that there were 7 Galvera-class demon kings out there. Turns out, she was equally worried as well, because apparently those dangerous beings had actually set their sights on her, and she asked him if he could finally sympathize with her a little. Her words were starting to annoy Maeve a lot, and she yelled at her, telling her to stop this nonsense at once. The demon lord she fought that day was cruel and cold-hearted, and there was no way she could ever believe that her attitude had just changed like that. Galvera said to her that the one who was fighting her that day was indeed her, but at the same time, it was not. She revealed to them that she had actually been brainwashed, her form had changed, and she was forced to invade the surface world. Maeve refused to believe that, since there was no being who could do such a thing to her, the demon lord. However, she told them that unfortunately, such a being does exist, and as a matter of fact, that demon could be called the god of demons. Hence, that being was known as the demon lord god. Just hearing that sent chills down their spines, while she further stated that there was no demon who could defy the will of the demon lord god. In fact, her true self did not even like fighting, and she loved the alcohol that humans make. However, 600 years ago, she was banished by being bathed in holy energy during her battle with the hero, and she fell into a near-death state. After that, the demon lord god's brainwashing was undone, and she was finally able to return to her original form. To prevent getting caught by the demon lord god once again, she had been repeatedly teleporting near the surface, but that was also starting to get really difficult now. The reason being that the demon lord god was soon going to resume his invasion of the surface, and once that happened, and the demons descended again, there would be nowhere left for her to run. All of a sudden, she teleported herself right into Frey's arms, and Maeve shouted that they should not believe a single word coming out of her mouth. He also agreed that it certainly was a hard story to believe. However, he pointed out that when Galvera appeared, the automatic summoning did not get activated, even though it was a skill that automatically summons heroic spirits regardless of his will whenever it detects an enemy. Since it did not activate, he believed that Galvera truly had no hostility against them. Still, Maeve brought up that what she did could not be forgiven so easily, and even if she did not do it of her own will, by her hands, her family and her comrades were slaughtered. Frey completely understood where she was coming from, but he also told her that if the demon invasion were to resume once again, the fact remained that they needed all the strength they could get right now. Galvera's power was incredibly vast, and that was a fact, and more importantly, if they had her on their side, they would also be able to get information about the demons that they had never known before. Galvera excitedly said to him that he was completely right about that, and that was exactly why they absolutely should form an alliance with her. She promised that all her subordinates would also become their strength, and they had already met one of them, Narga. She truly believed that if they could just join forces, they would be unstoppable. However, Frey stopped her and said that even though all that was true, they still could not team up. Maeve was his heroic spirit, and to him, she was a precious comrade, no matter how many benefits he might gain by teaming up with Galvera. If it meant that she would suffer, he could not overlook that at all, and therefore, he refused to form an alliance with the demon lord who killed her comrades. Maeve was simply speechless, but then all of a sudden, they looked at Galvera, and she literally started crying, which left all of them shocked, as they had never thought they would see a day when the demon lord was crying. The reason she was crying was because she had no idea what else she was supposed to do if he was refusing her deal. She just wanted to live in peace, and she kept on crying, while Frey, on the other hand, had no clue how to deal with a crying demon lord. Just then, Harvel called out to the demon lord, as he had something to say, and Frey had high hopes for him, as he believed that he might be able to get him out of this situation. However, he just started yelling and told Galvera to get off his master's arms already, which was not helping at all, and she started crying even more. She really wanted to be allies with them and kept on repeating that again and again. Seeing all that, even Maeve began to laugh, and she could not believe the kind of situation this had turned into, as everything just felt so stupid now. Of course, she could not just let go of everything that happened in the war 600 years ago. However, since Frey believed that the Demon Lord's power was necessary in the upcoming war, she agreed to make an alliance with her, only because she was a heroic spirit who belonged entirely to him. If that was the path that he had chosen, she was also ready to follow him, no matter what happened. He was very happy to hear that from her, and he thanked her from the bottom of his heart. With that said, he told Galvera to get off him already and stop crying, but she, on the other hand, did not hear a single word that Maeve had just said and kept crying, saying that she really wanted to team up with him. He told her that that was exactly what they had just said, and that they were ready to form an alliance with her. With teary eyes, she asked him if he was telling the truth, and he assured her that he was. He once again requested her to get down, but then all of a sudden, Narga came barging inside the room, and he was very excited to meet her. However, when he saw her wrapped up in Frey's arms, it made him furious, and he started shouting that he would not forgive him and all that. But Galvera gave him a death stare and commanded him to keep his damn mouth shut. With that out of the way, she turned back to her cheerful self, and since they had finally made an alliance, she started chugging down even more beers. As for Maeve, she looked at her and clarified that it was really not her fault for whatever happened during the war, but still, she apologized to her from the bottom of her heart and swore that from here on out, she would do everything in her power to support her master. Speaking of which, she quickly went up to him, and out of nowhere, she complimented him, saying that he was a fine-looking young man. The way he stuck to his convictions for the sake of those who were important to him was something she really liked about him, and so she got in real close and asked him if he would like to take the next step from this alliance as well and become her partner. He was shocked to hear that, and Maeve was even more surprised than him, but the one who got mad the most was none other than Harvel, and he shouted that there was no way he would let something like that happen to his master. He begged him to choose literally anyone but her, and Narga was exactly like that as well, while Frey just stood in the middle, telling all of them to cut it out already.